have a mic so everyone can hear the questions. Raise your hand if you have a question, and I'll bring you the mic. There we go. We'll start over here. Be loud.
What are the privacy concerns of testing for be it genes or HGH, whatever it may be? Is that something that when you join a league you would sign away? And what's going to be the implication if we have to do looking back at people's childhoods to see if they were given genes?
So there is a new statute
It just passed called the GINA, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, that prevents an employer from accessing your information. Without a sort of there's some exceptions to it, but there was an NBA player about 4 years ago on the Bulls, Curry, who had this, they thought, a genetic trait for quickly dying from this heart condition. And the Bulls insisted as part of his contract that he had to get that genetic test. He then got traded to the Knicks, who agreed not to. But another example is last year the NCAA has implemented for all the Tier 1 teams, football and other sports, that every single athlete has to either get a genetic test for the sickle cell trait or sign away a waiver on that. And so what's happening is, like the ASU team, all those players have been now genetically tested for that trait. And again, it's to try and protect their own health. It's not to discriminate against them or anything. So there are these exceptions of how you can do these tests, but generally a team without that health exception cannot ask you to get a genetic test and disclose it.
I'll just shout.
Okay. If you are one of the thousands of Olympic athletes who are subject to the authority of the World Anti-Doping Agency, and that means that you must conform to their whereabouts system, you must tell them where you are 365 days a year, you must tell them when and which times of day you're going to be available, etc., etc. It means that when you submit a urine sample, you must be naked from the waist down, and the doping control officer must observe your sex and excretory organ actually emitting the urine, because there have been so many technological tricks to circumvent that. The goal is what I would call physiological transparency. And physiological transparency means a real sacrifice of privacy of various kinds. And I have, I'm thinking of one survey that suggested that a clear majority of the athletes, at least who were asked, said that they would rather conform to this system than live with the uncertainties, of an uncontrolled system where their competitors can do just about whatever they want. It's a terrible bind, is what it is. And as the testing becomes more and more refined, perhaps more and more intrusive, if muscle biopsies, God forbid, were to enter onto the palette of criteria for whether you are a normal human athlete, I wonder, where is the tipping point at which point the majority of people who are already capable of devoting themselves to the very, very strenuous lives of elite athletes, when are they going to say, I can't do this anymore? There must have been some very fine athletes who said, I just can't live with this. There are fine athletes who said, I simply won't go, and have had to give up. This is a very, very difficult situation.
Next question. Keep your hands up so I know where you're going next.
Don? Now that we are having all of the genetic testing of admittedly elite athletes, and we are having more and more information about these elite athletes come out, is there any potential for abuse or misuse by people who would be able to have access to these results of genes that occur in people who are of such the elite spectrum of athletes?
Well, for example, if the NFL started testing for the APOE4 gene, because you're at a much higher risk of a serious concussion with a head hit with that gene, So they maybe should be. And another issue, should they be getting sued for not testing for that? I would argue that they're almost in a point now with the evidence as strong as it is, that for not testing it, they're almost negligent right now. And that a lawsuit could be brought by and already, some players have been suing the league. This could be another claim very quickly. But that information is very critical to your future prognosis. I mean, if you have that gene, you have a clear, on average, a clear cognitive decline in your 40s and 50s, even if it's not clinically detected. Even if you don't get full dementia, you're still going to have a cognitive decline. To know that as a 20-year-old player, both for you to know it and your family to know it, and then the other thing is your family also has the gene too. That's the other aspect about it. So there is a lot of privacy issues with this kind of testing. There is protection against health insurers and employers from getting the information, but not life insurers, not disability insurers, not long-term disability insurers, and so on.
If I'm not mistaken, most of the gene testing laws have to do with actual health issues, which prevents the employer from testing for those. Is it possible that there's going to be a new set of laws that actually is going to test for these gene doping advancements rather than just issues?
There's nothing on the horizon to suggest there's any policy movement in that direction at all.
In the new collective bargaining agreement, the NFL and the NFL Players Association actually agreed to start doing human growth hormone testing. Now the holdup seems to be over the procedure that will be used. The Players Association seems to say that they're not quite sure that WADA's procedure is okay for their players.
Right.
What is your stance on that? Do you think this is just a stalling tactic, or does the Players Association actually have a valid point?
For what my opinion is worth, I would guess it is more of a stalling tactic. One argument is that, from the union side, is that what if an NFL player tests high on human growth hormone? NFL players as a subpopulation may be high on human growth hormone in a natural or normal way, and we don't want people to be testing positive in a way that indicts them and disadvantages them simply for being who they are. One of the issues that has bedeviled dope testing for a long time has been the scientific quality of the tests. It's certainly gotten better and better. The growth hormone test has been controversial, has been in development and controversial for at least 10 years. So that, on the other hand, there are 24 or 32 scientists who have signed a letter saying that the union is obfuscating, that the test is certainly okay from a scientific standpoint, and then the journalist adds at the bottom of this report that a great number of the people who were surveyed happen to be connected to the World Anti-Doping Agency in one way or another. They may have a lab that WADA has got to accredit, and that's a lot of power. So the bottom line here is, I think the union may very well be waffling. We've seen this sort of behavior before. In 2005, we saw management and labor in Major League Baseball collaborating to foot drag on steroids in an effective, but of course in also reputation-damaging sort of way. In this case, my guess, for what it's worth, is that this is, dilatory behavior as opposed to well-founded scientific doubts being expressed by the labor side. Unions have a record in that department.
I guess we're getting the stop sign for our timer.
One more.
I can't seem to get it on, but I think I can talk loud enough. With this new push, and I think it's in Mississippi right now, to create where a zygote at conception now has personal rights as a constitutional amendment, and I understand it's also proceeding in other states. What impact is that going to have on having to prepare or legally have guardians for each zygote so that the parents don't have the opportunity to supply such kind of additional gene additions?
Well, so Louisiana is the one state that already has that on the book, so we can see what happens there. People are still creating embryos through IVF, but the problem is you just can't throw them away. And so what's happening is you're having to store all these ones up in freezers. It costs some money, but there's now 400,000 of them in storage. And some of them will get adopted. Some parents will come and adopt one, but it's like a couple hundred out of 400,000. So basically, these things just get stored. And what's going to happen is parents are going to select the good ones, the ones that have the good genes, healthy genes, intelligence genes soon, athletic genes soon, and then left the others behind to just stay in freezers for all their eternity. That'd be how it's being dealt with right now in Louisiana. That's what these other states
But
are
do you think that a parent who then chooses to say, well, yeah, but I want to enhance the athletic capacity of my child, is going to have to face the legal issue of, whoops, wait, this person has rights, and now we have to have guardians and the courts involved as to whether the parent can add some kind of gene to that.
Right. So there is a whole bunch of lawsuits where you're basically suing the doctor for the mistake when you're genetically testing or whatever, or not genetically testing the embryo. It's called a wrongful birth lawsuit. But only 3 states allow the actual kid to sue, as opposed to the parents to sue. And of those 3 states, one of them, California, doesn't allow you to sue your parents. So there'll be 2 states, I think it's Pennsylvania and Washington, that allow you to sue your parents for making a decision. But you might also be able to sue the doctor for adding in this gene and something goes wrong. And then,
More work for lawyers.
yes, good.
I think we have time for one more question, if anyone else.
So I'm not sure whether you're familiar with the movie Gattaca or not, in which, every child is genetically engineered and the ones conceived in the old-fashioned way are at a disadvantage. And when I saw that originally, I thought that was very far-fetched, and all the employment was based on your genetic engineering. So given that, do you feel like we're moving in that direction, or is that still, science fiction fantasy?
In the last 5 years, we've moved dramatically in that direction. It's still not anywhere near that movie, but it's gone from being sort of in the laboratory and the research thing to actually being used by many people now. Hundreds of thousands of people have gotten their genes tested. The government's goal is to be able to have your entire genome tested for $1,000 within 5 years. They think they'll get there at the end of this year. And then their assumption is we'll all get that test. We'll all have our genome on a chip because there'll be so many medical uses for it. But there'll be all kinds of other uses. The coach of the team, the kid's team, will look at the genotype of each of his kids' chips and pick, who'll be the goalie, who'll be the whatever. That's 5 years away. That's coming very quickly. And most people don't know how fast it's coming because it's just in the last couple of years we've gone over this hump and it's now hitting the mainstream.
Quick follow-up on that, Gary. Would you mind talking a little bit about the price drop in the last 10 years over the cost of genetic testing?
So, the first genome was sequenced 10 years ago for $3 billion. A couple of years ago, it was $100,000. It's now companies offering this for $5,000. You can go in today get your entire genome sequenced for $5,000 to $7,000 from different vendors. And all of them, including there's a big group across the street here, is working very hard on this to get it down to $1,000. And again, there'll be tremendous health benefits from that. They're already seeing that, finding these rare mutations in people with various types of diseases or cancers or so on. Tremendous health drive for that. But there'll be all other kinds of implications of using this for athletic performance, intelligence, you mean behavioral traits. It's all going to be there now. It's just going to be, we're all going to have it on a little chip.
Any other last questions?